What if there were no ceiling on what you could become, no boundaries set by your birth, your bank account, or your last name, and the only thing actually standing between you and true greatness was a way of thinking you simply hadn't learned yet? What if the same inner power that shaped Lincoln, the same quiet force that carried Washington to the darkest days at Valley Forge, was already sitting inside you right now, this very moment, waiting to be recognized and used? Today we're opening the final book in a remarkable trilogy, one that takes everything we've learned about getting rich and getting well and aims it squarely at the biggest target of all, becoming genuinely, truly great. This is The Science of Being Great, written by Wallace D. Wattles and first published in 1911. As we settle into this one, it's worth remembering where Wattles was coming from. He'd already written The Science of Getting Rich, a book aimed at anyone who wanted wealth and was willing to think their way there first and philosophize about it afterward. He'd followed that with The Science of Being Well, a practical handbook for anyone who wanted their body restored to full vigor and health. And now, in this third and final volume, he turns his attention to something even larger than money or health alone, to personal greatness itself, the kind that lifts an ordinary man or woman out of small, cramped life and into what Wattles calls a powerful life. In his own preface, Wattles tells us plainly who this book is for. It's for the men and women, young or old, who wish to make the most of life by making the most of themselves. He promises to show the way to power and capability as plainly and simply as he can, without a single wasted word, and he states, with real conviction, that the system he's about to lay out will work, that it cannot fail. And then he leaves us with a charge that echoes through the whole book like a drumbeat. No mere reading of books can develop a great personality. Nothing can make you great but thought. Therefore think. 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 So let's begin exactly where Wattles begins, with the astonishing claim that greatness isn't reserved for the chosen few, but is available right now to absolutely anyone willing to claim it. There is a principle of power, Wattles tells us, living inside every single person, and through the intelligent use of this principle, any of us can develop our own mental faculties without any real limit at all. No one has ever become so great in any particular gift that it becomes impossible for someone else to become greater still. Genius, in his definition, isn't some rare accident of birth. Genius is omniscience flowing into man. It's the union of the individual soul with the divine in action. And this is what separates genius from mere talent. Talent might simply be one single faculty developed further than the rest. But genius is something else entirely, a direct connection to a reservoir of power that has no known boundary. We don't actually know where the limits of the human mind sit, Wattles points out. We don't even know that a limit exists at all. He draws a sharp line here between man and the rest of the animal kingdom. The lower animals can be trained and developed by outside forces, but they cannot consciously develop themselves. Man alone holds that particular power, and he holds it, as far as anyone can tell, without any real ceiling on it. Just as a tree or a plant exists to grow, so does a human being. Except a tree can only grow along the fixed lines nature laid down for it, while a person can grow in whatever direction they genuinely choose. Nothing that's possible in spirit is impossible in flesh and blood, Wattles insists. Nothing a person can truly think becomes impossible in action. Nothing a person can genuinely imagine remains impossible of realization. Growth, then, isn't optional for us. It's essential to our very happiness. A life without progress becomes unbearable over time, and Wattles goes so far as to say that a person who genuinely stops growing must eventually become either imbecile or insane. the more full, rounded, and harmonious our growth, the happier we become. Here's a beautiful image he offers to describe how this plays out differently in each of us. Imagine a gardener tossing an entire basket of mixed flower bulbs together in one pile. To a casual glance, they'd all look essentially the same. But once planted, growth reveals a tremendous difference between them. One becomes a rose, brightening some dark corner. One becomes a lily, teaching a lesson of purity to every eye that sees it. One becomes a climbing vine, softening the rugged edge of some bare rock. One becomes a great oak, sheltering birds in its branches and flocks beneath its shade. And every single one of them turns out to be something worthwhile, something rare, something genuinely its own. Wattles wants us to see that there really are no common people, not in any deep sense. In moments of national crisis, he points out the ordinary loafer on the street corner or the neighborhood's known drunkard can suddenly rise up as a hero or a statesman, the instant the principle of power within them gets shaken awake. Every village, he says, has its own quietly great figure, someone others instinctively turn to for wisdom in times of trouble, someone recognized, almost without anyone quite saying so, as simply being great. That person does small things in a great way. And Wattles insists that person, whoever it is, could do great things too, in exactly the same great way, if only they undertook them. So could you. And here's the key mechanism he wants us to understand. The principle of power gives us exactly what we ask of it. If we only ever attempt small things, it only ever supplies us power for small things. But if we genuinely try to do great things in a great way, it hands us all the power there is. He closes this opening chapter with a contrast between two fundamentally different mental postures a person can hold. One is like a football. It is bounce. It reacts strongly whenever force gets applied to it, but it originates absolutely nothing on its own. There's no power inside it all. People of this type are entirely controlled by circumstance and environment. Their whole destiny gets decided by things completely external to themselves. The other posture is like a flowing spring. Power rises up from the very center of the person. They carry within them what Wattles calls a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. They radiate force. Their environment feels it. And no greater good can come to any man or woman, Wattles tells us, than become genuinely self-active in exactly this way. Now that we understand greatness is available to anyone in principle, Wattles wants to knock down the first objection most of us raise almost automatically. The idea that our background, our family, or our starting point in life somehow disqualifies us. You are not barred from attaining greatness by heredity. He tells us directly, it doesn't matter who your ancestors were or how humble their station happened to be. There's no such thing as inheriting some fixed, unchangeable mental position. However small the mental capital handed down to you by your parents, it can always be increased. No one, Wattles insists, is born incapable of growth. He's honest that heredity does count for something. We're all born with certain subconscious tendencies, perhaps toward melancholy, or toward cowardice, or toward a quick temper. But every single one of these tendencies, he argues, can be overcome, and fairly easily too, once the real inner self genuinely awakens. An inherited mental trait, in his framework, is really nothing more than a habit of thought belonging to your father or mother impressed onto your subconscious mind. And any habit of thought can be replaced by deliberately forming its opposite. You can substitute genuine cheerfulness for a tendency toward despondency. You can overcome cowardice. You can overcome a quick temper. He also takes on the science of phrenology here, the idea popular in his day that the physical shape of a person's skull determined their capacity for particular talents. He grants there's some truth buried in it, that different faculties really do seem localized in different brain regions, and that a faculty backed by more active brain cells in its area does tend to express itself more powerfully. But he firmly rejects a conclusion some people drew from this, that your skull shape therefore fixes your station in life. Research of his time, he says, had already shown that a smaller brain area packed with many fine, active cells could produce results every bit as powerful as a larger area with coarser cells, and that by turning the principle of power deliberately into any particular section of the brain, with real will and purpose behind it, a person could actually multiply their brain cells in that area more or less indefinitely. Any talent you already possess, however small or undeveloped it currently seems, can be built up. You can act most easily, sure, through whatever faculties happen to already be well developed, those things that come naturally to you, but with the necessary effort, Wattles insists, you can develop any talent at all. The brain does not make the man. The man makes the brain. To drive this point home, he offers us a small gallery of examples. Martin Luther, as a child, sang for bread in the streets. The naturalist Linnaeus had only $40 to his name to fund his own education, and had him in his own shoes and begged meals from friends along the way. Hugh Miller, apprenticed as a stonemason, began teaching himself geology right there in the quarry where he worked. George Stephenson, who would go on to invent the locomotive engine, started out as a coal miner. James, what was a sickly child, too frail even to attend regular school. Abraham Lincoln was, of course, simply a poor boy. In every single case, Wattles argues, we see the very same principle of power lifting a person clean above every obstacle heredity or circumstance had placed in front of them. And that same principle, he tells us plainly, is sitting inside you too. So if talent and brain power aren't really what separates the great from the ordinary, what is? Wattles turns next to answer exactly that question. A person's brain, body, mind, faculties, and talents, he tells us, are merely the instruments used in the act of demonstrating greatness. They don't by themselves make a person great. You could have a large brain, a sharp mind, strong natural faculties, brilliant talents, and still fail to be a great person unless you actually use all of it in a great way. And the particular quality that allows someone to use their abilities in that great way is what Wattles names wisdom. Wisdom, in his definition, is the essential foundation of greatness itself. Wisdom is the power to perceive the best possible ends worth aiming at and the best possible means of reaching them. It's the power to consistently perceive the right thing to do. A person wise enough to know the right course of action, good enough to genuinely want to take only that right course, and strong enough to actually carry it out, becomes, almost automatically, a person others recognize as great. But here's the catch. Wisdom depends entirely on knowledge, and any individual person's knowledge is, by its very nature, limited. So how can real wisdom ever be available to us? Only, Wattles argues, by connecting our own limited mind to a knowledge far greater than our own, and drawing from it, through a kind of inner inspiration, the wisdom our own limitations would otherwise deny us. And this, he insists, is exactly what the truly great men and women throughout history have actually done. He offers Abraham Lincoln as his central illustration here. Lincoln had a famously limited formal education. What he had instead was the power to perceive truth directly. Back during the fierce arguments over slavery and compromise, when nearly everyone else around him remained confused about what was genuinely right or what ought to be done, Lincoln was never uncertain. He saw straight through the superficial arguments of the pro-slavery faction, and he saw just as clearly the impracticality of the most fanatical abolitionists. He perceived the right ends worth aiming for, and the best means of reaching them. And it was precisely because people recognized this in him, Wattles argues, that they made him president. Even after reaching the highest office in the land, Lincoln found himself surrounded by a crowd of supposedly able advisors who could barely agree among themselves. And at times, nearly the entire North stood opposed to what he was trying to do. And yet, he consistently saw the truth when everyone else around him was fooled by mere appearances. Where did a comparatively unlearned man draw this kind of wisdom from? Wattles is emphatic that it wasn't some peculiar shape of Lincoln's skull, or some special fineness in the texture of his brain, or any superior reasoning power at all. Ordinary processes of reasoning, he tells us, don't typically arrive at deep truth on their own. What Lincoln had was spiritual insight. He perceived truth directly. And Wattles finds the very same quality at work in Washington, whose faith and courage held the colonies together through the darkest, most hopeless stretches of the Revolution, and in the strange genius of Napoleon, who always seemed to know, at least in military matters, exactly the best course to take. The greatness in each of these men, Wattles concludes, was really located in something larger than the men themselves. Behind Washington and behind Lincoln stood something greater than either one individually. Truth, he reasons, cannot be perceived until it actually exists, and it cannot exist at all without a mind somewhere to hold it. So wisdom ultimately comes down to one thing: reading the mind of God. This naturally brings Wattles to describe exactly what that larger mind actually is and how you and I relate to it. There exists, he tells us, a cosmic intelligence present in and through all things, the one true underlying substance from which everything else proceeds. It is intelligent substance, or what Wattles simply calls mind stuff. It is quite directly God. Wherever there's no substance, he reasons, there can be no intelligence either. Because wherever there's no substance, there's simply nothing at all. Thought, he argues, cannot merely be a function or a vibration, because both of those are just varieties of motion, and it's simply not conceivable that motion alone could somehow think. Thought has to belong to substance itself, not to the mere movement of that substance. And crucially, thought isn't actually located in the brain's raw physical substance either, since brain matter, without life in it, is entirely unintelligent and dead. Thought belongs instead to the animating life principle, the spirit substance, which is the real, essential you. The brain doesn't think. The man thinks, and simply expresses that thought through his brain. Just as your own spirit permeates your body and thinks and knows through it, so too does the original spirit substance, God, permeate the whole of nature, thinking and knowing through it. Nature, in Wattles' framework, is every bit as intelligent as man, and in fact knows considerably more, because this all-mind has remained in touch with everything since the very beginning of creation, holding within itself the complete memory of everything that has ever happened, right down to the fall of a single sparrow. Man, Wattles tells us, is himself a form of thinking substance, a genuine portion of this cosmic substance, but limited one, while the cosmic intelligence he sprang from, the very one Jesus called the Father, remains entirely unlimited. All intelligence, all power, and all force flow from that Father. And Jesus, Wattles points out, stated this connection plainly and repeatedly throughout his teaching, tracing his own wisdom and power directly back to his unity with the Father and to his own perception of the thoughts of God. My Father and I are one, he said. This union was the true foundation of both his knowledge and his power. He urged the people around him to wake up spiritually, to hear his voice and become like him, comparing the unthinking, circumstance-driven person to a dead man lying in a tomb, and calling on that person to come forth and truly live. We are immersed, Wattles tells us, in a mind that contains a whole of knowledge and a whole of truth, and that mind is actively seeking to hand this knowledge over to us, because our Father delights in giving good gifts to his children. The great prophets, seers, and truly great men and women throughout history were made great, Wattles insists, by what they received directly from God, not simply by what other people happen to teach them. And this same limitless reservoir of wisdom and power stands open to you as well, ready to be drawn upon according to your own genuine needs. You can make yourself into whatever you desire to become. You can do what you genuinely wish to do. You can have what you truly want. All of it begins with learning to become consciously one with the Father before you can genuinely draw on that larger wisdom. Though, Wattles insists there's some necessary clearing out to do first, and this is where he turns next. Draw near to God, he tells us, quoting scripture, and God will draw near to you. But if you want to become like God, capable of reading his thoughts, there are certain inner obstacles that first have to be cleared entirely out of the way. You can never become a truly great man or woman, Wattles states plainly, until you've overcome anxiety, worry, and fear. It's simply impossible for an anxious, worried, or fearful person to perceive truth clearly, because those particular mental states distort everything around them, throwing every fact out of its proper relation. If you're currently anxious about money or financial matters, Wattles points readers back to the first book in this series, The Science of Getting Rich, for fuller treatment. But his core message here is the same one running through that earlier work. There is no genuine cause for financial worry at all. Anyone willing to do so can rise above want, secure everything they truly need, and become prosperous, because the very same source you're drawing on for mental and spiritual growth is equally available to supply your material wants. The same goes for health. If you're anxious about your physical condition, Wattles reminds you that perfect health remains available to you, provided you're willing to obey the simple laws of right living. That same intelligence eager to hand you wealth and spiritual power will just as readily give you health. Conquer poor health, he says. Cast out fear entirely. But rising above worry over money and worry over health still isn't quite enough on its own. Wattles insists you must also rise above moral wrongdoing of every kind. Take an honest look inward, right now, at your own true motives and make certain they're genuinely sound. Cast out lust. Stop being ruled by mere appetite, and instead begin actively governing it. Eat only to satisfy real hunger, never for gluttonous pleasure. And in every area of life, bring the flesh into obedience to the spirit. Lay aside greed entirely. It's perfectly legitimate, Wattles says, to desire wealth and power for the sake of your soul's growth, but never simply to feed the appetites of the flesh. Cast out pride and vanity too. Give up any secret wish to rule over other people or to simply outdo them. This, Wattles warns, is a particularly insidious temptation, since almost nothing appeals more strongly to the average person than sitting in the most honored seat, being respectfully greeted in public, being addressed with some title of importance. The hidden desire to exercise control over others, he says, is the true secret motive driving nearly every selfish person. And the entire competitive struggle of the ordinary world is really just the same battle playing out again and again. You must rise above that world and above its underlying motives, and seek instead only genuine, abundant life. Cast out envy as well, since you're able to have everything you genuinely want, without needing to envy anyone else for what they happen to have. And above everything else, Wallace insists, make absolutely certain you hold no malice or ill will toward any single person, because doing so severs your own connection to the very mind whose treasures you're hoping to draw from. The one who does not love his brother, as the old teaching goes, does not truly love God either. Once you've gone through each of these temptations and deliberately cleared them from your heart, Wattles asks you to resolve, with the full strength of your soul, to abandon not just wrong thought, but every action, habit, and course of behavior that fails to measure up to your own highest ideals. Only then, he says, are you genuinely ready for the next step on this road toward greatness. That next step concerns something Wattles calls your point of view, and he considers it absolutely central to everything that follows. So central that he devotes real time here to 2 whole chapters unpacking it. First from the wider social angle, and then from the personal one. Without faith, Wattles reminds us, it's impossible to please God, and it's equally impossible to become great yourself. He points to an unwavering faith as a defining trait shared by every genuinely great figure in history. Lincoln through the darkest days of the war, Washington enduring Valley Forge, the crippled missionary Livingstone pressing to the heart of Africa, driven by his hatred of the slave trade. But this isn't, Wallace clarifies, faith in oneself or in one's own personal power. It's faith in a larger principle, in the something great that upholds what's right, and that can be relied upon to eventually deliver victory. Whether or not you're able to hold this kind of faith, Wattles argues, depends heavily on your point of view. You have to learn to see the world as something still evolving, something still becoming, rather than as some finished, static product. Millions of years ago, God was working through very low, crude forms of life, and yet every single one of them was perfect after its own kind, for its own particular stage. The world during that ancient period was genuinely perfect for that period, even though God's work clearly wasn't yet complete. And this, Wattles insists, remains just as true of the world today. Physically, socially, industrially, everything currently existing is good, and everything is perfect for its present stage, even though nothing anywhere is yet finished or complete. This has to become your settled point of view. The world and everything it contains is perfect, though not yet complete. Nothing is fundamentally wrong with anything, and nothing is fundamentally wrong with anybody. Nature herself is a great, continuously advancing presence, working for the benefit of all, containing no genuine evil within her, only an unfinished process still moving steadily forward. The very same reasoning, Wattles argues, applies to human society and government too. Yes, there are trusts and combinations of capital and strikes and lockouts and every other visible friction of industrial life. But all of it, he insists, is simply part of the larger forward movement, exactly as necessary to the unfolding of a completed society as the strange creatures of the age of reptiles were to the unfolding of the age that followed them. See government and industry as already perfect for a current stage and rapidly advancing toward full completion, and you'll understand there's genuinely nothing here to fear, nothing worth any real anxiety. Wattles anticipates the obvious objection. What about child labor or the exploitation of workers crowded into filthy, unsanitary factories? Aren't these things simply evil? His answer is that such conditions are no more inherently evil than the ways of the primitive cave dweller were evil in their own time. They represent the industrial equivalent of humanity's savage developmental stage. And for that particular stage, they remain perfect. Nothing better becomes possible, he argues, until we as a whole species rise above being mental savages in matters of business and industry. And this rise has to happen gradually through individuals here and there who are ready for a higher viewpoint. And notably, Wattles places the real power for this change with the workers themselves, since they hold the numbers and the leverage. Whenever they genuinely desire a fuller, richer, more harmonious life, rather than simply more material comfort, industry itself will rise correspondingly above its current rough and brutal stage. None of this, Wattles is careful to add, means you should stop working to make things better. It simply means you can work to help complete an unfinished society, rather than working desperately to rescue a decaying one. And you'll do that work with a far better heart and a far more hopeful spirit as a result. Seeing civilization as a fundamentally good thing steadily improving, rather than a fundamentally bad thing steadily decaying, makes an enormous difference to your own capacity for growth. One viewpoint expands your mind. The other contracts it. One lets you do great works in a great way. The other reduces you to a small, discouraged patchwork reformer, straining to rescue a few isolated souls from what starts to feel like an already doomed world. If we take the same principle and turn it inward, toward how we view the individual people around us, Wattles argues it becomes even more important than how we view society as a whole. You must learn to see your fellow men and women. He tells us your acquaintances, your friends, your family, and above all yourself, not as lost or fundamentally flawed beings, but as perfect creatures actively advancing toward completeness. There are, in his framework, no genuinely bad or evil people at all. He offers a memorable image here. A locomotive engine running smoothly along its rails, pulling a heavy train, is perfect after its own kind, and the steam power driving it is entirely good. Should a broken rail throw that same engine into a ditch, the engine doesn't suddenly become evil simply because it's now off its track. It remains a perfectly good engine, just currently misplaced. In exactly the same way, Wattles argues there are no evil people, only perfectly good people who happen to be off the rails at the moment, and what they genuinely need isn't condemnation or punishment, but simply help finding their way back onto the tracks. What strikes us as evil or undeveloped, Wattles suggests, often looks that way only because of habits of thought we ourselves have been trained into. The bulb that will eventually produce a beautiful white lily looks, in its raw root form, rather unsightly, even mildly repulsive. But how foolish it would be to condemn that bulb for its outward appearance, when we already know the lily is quietly waiting inside it. In exactly the same way, we have to learn to look at every person, however unlovely their outward behavior might currently seem, as perfect at their own particular stage of being and steadily becoming complete. Once we genuinely arrive at this point of view, Wattles tells us, we lose every desire to find fault with people, to judge them, to criticize or condemn them. We stop working like people desperately trying to save a few lost souls, and start working instead like beings quietly helping to complete something already glorious. And this same expansive point of view has to extend to how you see yourself as well. You must always view yourself as a great, advancing soul. Learn to say, There is that within me which knows no imperfection, no weakness, no sickness. The world remains incomplete, but God within my own consciousness is both perfect and complete already. Nothing can be wrong except my own personal attitude, and my attitude only goes wrong when I disobey that inner voice. I am a perfect expression of God as far as I've developed so far, and I will keep pressing on toward completeness. I will trust, and I will not be afraid. Once you can say this and genuinely mean it, Wattles tells us, you'll have shed every trace of fear, and you'll be well along the road toward developing a truly great and powerful personality. Having reached this expansive new viewpoint, the next step Wattles asks of us is what he calls consecration. And this simply means learning real obedience to your own soul. There's something inside you, he tells us, constantly urging you toward a higher, more advancing path. And that inner urge is nothing less than the divine principle of power itself. And you must learn to obey it without hesitation or argument. If you're ever going to be truly great, that greatness has to be an expression of something within you, and it can't come merely from your intellect or your reasoning power alone. Reason, Wattles points out rather bluntly, behaves like a hired lawyer, willing to argue equally well for either side of any question. The intellect of a thief plans robbery just as readily as the intellect of a saint plans some great act of charity. Intellect can show you the best method for accomplishing something, but it can never, by itself, show you the right thing to accomplish in the first place. By returning again and again to your own deepest center, Wattles tells us, you can always locate the pure, unmistakable idea of what's right in any given relationship or situation. To achieve greatness and real power, all that's required is bringing your life into conformity with that pure inner idea, wherever you find it. Every single compromise you make on this point, he warns, costs you real power. There are surely ideas you've already outgrown, habits you continue only out of pure momentum that quietly diminish you and keep you acting small. Rise above all of that. Free yourself from outdated customs and institutions you don't genuinely believe in. Abandon any creeds you don't sincerely hold. If you picked up sensual habits of mind or body, let them go. If you're still indulging distrustful fears that things will go wrong or that people will betray you, rise above them too. The steps of full consecration, Wattles tells us, are actually few and remarkably simple. You cannot be ruled by forces beneath you if you're to become great. You have to rule instead from above. This means your body must come under the governance of your mind. Your mind, in turn, under the governance of your soul, and your soul, finally, under the guidance of God, whose vision extends far beyond the limited boundaries of your own personal understanding. Say it plainly to yourself. I surrender my body to be ruled by my mind. I surrender my mind to be governed by my soul. I surrender my soul to the guidance of God. Complete that surrender thoroughly, Wattles tells us, and you've taken the second great step on the road to greatness and genuine power. The next step Wattles describes is one he calls identification, and it asks something rather bold of us, to consciously recognize that the principle of power inside you is nothing less than God himself. This isn't some artificial position, to be merely assumed for effect, Wattles insists. It's a plain fact simply waiting to be recognized. You are already one with God. What remains is simply to become consciously aware of it. There exists one substance, the ultimate source of everything. And this substance carries within itself all the power required to create anything at all. This substance is conscious, and it thinks, working always with complete understanding and intelligence. And since man himself is substance, and man is conscious and thinks, man must therefore be conscious substance too. It isn't reasonable, Wattles argues, to imagine there could be more than one kind of conscious substance in existence. So man himself is, in essence, the original substance, the very source of all life and power, simply wrapped now in a physical body. Man cannot be something fundamentally separate from God. Intelligence remains one and the same wherever it appears, and it can only ever belong to intelligent substance, and intelligent substance is precisely what God is. So all the talents, powers, and possibilities present in God are equally present in man, not in a select handful of exceptional individuals, but in every single person. Wattles is careful here, though, to add an important qualifier. While man is indeed original substance, carrying within himself all power and possibility, his individual consciousness remains genuinely limited. He simply doesn't know everything there is to know, and so he remains liable to error and honest mistake. To protect himself from these mistakes, he has to unite his own mind with that larger mind outside him which does know everything, becoming consciously one with God. There exists a mind surrounding each of us on every side. Wattles tells us, closer than our own breath, holding within itself the memory of everything that has ever happened, and everything currently in existence as well, along with the great underlying purpose behind all of nature, meaning it also knows what's still to come. You are made of the very same essential stuff as this mind. You proceeded directly from it, and you can identify yourself with it so completely that you come to know what it knows. Jesus, Wattles reminds us, put this very plainly himself. My Father is greater than I. I come from him. I and my Father are one. Your own identification with the infinite has to be accomplished through conscious recognition on your part, recognizing plainly that there's only God and that all intelligence belongs to this one substance. You affirm something along these lines. There is only one, and that one is everywhere. I surrender myself to conscious unity with the highest. Not I, but the Father. I will to be one with the Supreme and to live the divine life. If you've genuinely done the work described in the earlier chapters, reaching the right viewpoint and completing your consecration, Wattles assures us this conscious identification won't prove particularly difficult to attain. And once it's attained, the power you've been seeking becomes genuinely yours, because you've made yourself one with all the power there truly is. If you've been enjoying this journey through Wattles' complete trilogy so far, this is a natural moment to hit that subscribe button, so you don't miss where this remarkable line of thinking leads next. And where it leads next is into one of the most practical and immediately useful chapters in the whole book, the one Wattles calls idealization. You are, he tells us, a thinking center within original substance, and the thoughts held by that substance carry genuine creative power. Whatever gets formed within its thought, and held steadily as a thought form, must eventually come into visible, material existence. A thought form held firmly in thinking substance is already, in a real sense, a genuine thing, whether or not it has yet become visible to ordinary sight. You take on internally the very form in which you consistently think of yourself, and you gradually surround yourself with the invisible forms of whatever you associate with in your ongoing thought. So if you genuinely desire something, Wattles instructs, picture it clearly and hold that picture steadily in your mind until it hardens into a definite thought form. Provided your own daily practices don't cut you off from this larger creative source, the thing you want will eventually come to you in material form, simply in obedience to the very law by which the universe itself was created. applied specifically to yourself. This means you should never form a thought picture of yourself in connection with disease or weakness, but instead form a clear conception of health and strength. Make a thought form of yourself as vigorous, hardy, and perfectly well, and impress that thought form firmly on creative intelligence. Provided your daily habits don't violate the actual laws by which the physical body gets built, that thought form will eventually manifest in your own flesh. Wattles offers a vivid illustration here. Picture a young law student who genuinely wants to become great, while also attending faithfully to viewpoint, consecration, and identification as previously described. Let him picture himself as a truly great lawyer, pleading his case with matchless eloquence before judge and jury, commanding an almost limitless store of truth, knowledge, and wisdom. Let him hold that picture of himself as the great lawyer in every conceivable situation, even while, in his outward daily circumstances, he remains still just an ordinary student. As that thought form grows steadily more detailed and habitual in his mind, both his inner creative energies and outer circumstances begin working together, gradually drawing him toward becoming exactly what he's been picturing. The very same principle, Wattles points out, applies just as well to a music student picturing themselves performing flawless harmonies before delighted audiences, or to an actor forming the highest possible conception of their own craft, or equally to a farmer or mechanic doing precisely the same inner work in their own field. Fix upon your own ideal of what you genuinely wish to become. Choose carefully, and be sure you're choosing what will actually satisfy you in the long run. Don't lean too heavily on the advice of those around you. No one else, Wattles insists, can know better than you do what's genuinely right for your own life. Listen respectfully to what others say, certainly, but always form your own final conclusions. Do not let other people decide what you are to be. Be what you feel that you truly want to be. Once you've settled on what you genuinely want to become, form the very highest conception of that thing you're capable of imagining, and turn that conception into a settled thought form. Hold that thought form as fact, as the real truth about yourself, and believe in it completely. Close your ears to every discouraging voice. Never mind if people call you foolish or call you a mere dreamer. Wattles reminds us that Napoleon Bonaparte, as a half-starved young lieutenant, already pictured himself as a general commanding armies and master of France, and eventually became, in outward reality, exactly what it had already become in his own mind. But Wattles is quick to add an important caution right here, because forming the ideal is only half the work. If you stopped at merely picturing your ideal self, he warns, you would never actually become great. You'd simply become a dreamer of dreams, a builder of castles in the air, and far too many people, he notes, stop precisely there. Two things are genuinely necessary. First, the making of the thought form itself, which we've just covered. And second, the actual, ongoing appropriation of everything that surrounds and belongs to that thought form out here in the real, external world. Once you've formed your thought form, Wattles tells us you're already on the inside exactly what you want to be. The task now is to become, gradually but genuinely, that same thing on the outside as well. You obviously can't leap immediately into performing before the world as the great lawyer, actor, or musician you already know yourself to be inwardly. No one will yet entrust you with great responsibilities, because you haven't yet made yourself known through your actions. But you can, Wattles insists, always begin doing small things in a genuinely great way, starting today. This, he tells us, is the entire secret in miniature. You can begin being great this very day, right in your own home, your own store or office, out on the street, everywhere you happen to be, simply by doing everything you do in a great way. Put the full weight of your soul into every action, however small or ordinary, and let your family, friends, and neighbors see plainly, through your conduct, exactly what you really are. Don't boast about it. No one will believe you if you simply tell them you're great, but no one can seriously doubt it once they see it consistently expressed in your actions. Alongside this, Wattles asks you to develop absolute faith in your own perception of truth. Never act in haste. Be deliberate in everything, and wait patiently until you genuinely feel you know the true course to take. And once you do feel that certainty, follow it, even if the whole world around you happens to disagree. If you don't trust what feels true to you in small, everyday matters, Wattles argues, you'll never learn to draw on that same inner wisdom for larger ones. Nothing is too great, and nothing too small in the sight of the infinite. He reminds us, the same intelligence governing the move of the sun also takes note of a single sparrow's fall. Trust your own inner perception of truth in the ordinary details of daily life, and you'll find, over time, that your family, friends, and neighbors gradually begin turning to you for counsel and guidance, exactly the way a genuinely great personality is naturally sought out. Now that we understand how to form our ideal and begin realizing it in action, Wattles turns to two very practical obstacles almost everyone runs into along the way: hurry and habit. You likely carry, Wattles acknowledges, real problems of your own, financial pressures, awkward relationships, obligations that feel urgent and pressing. His advice here is firm. Do not rush into hasty action driven by superficial impulse. You can trust the larger creative power to work out the solution to your genuine personal difficulties. There is, in truth, no need to hurry at all. There is only God, and all remains well with the world. The very same intelligence alive within you, Wattles reminds us, is equally alive within the things you actually desire, actively draw you toward them, and them toward you, provided you hold your thought and your faith steady and correct. Hurry itself, he tells us plainly, is simply a manifestation of fear. Whoever genuinely does not fear has all the time they need. Act instead with complete faith in your own perception of truth, and you'll find you're never too early and never too late, and nothing genuinely goes wrong. If circumstances appear to be going wrong, don't let your mind become disturbed by mere appearances. Nothing can actually go wrong in this world except your own personal attitude, and that only goes wrong when you slip into the wrong frame of mind. Whenever you notice yourself becoming excited, worried, or hurried, Wattles suggests simply sitting down to think it over calmly, or taking a break, playing a game, or even a short trip, until your poise naturally returns. Poise and power, he tells us, are inseparably linked together. A calm, balanced mind is a strong and great mind. A hurried, agitated mind is inevitably a weak one. Falling into hurry cuts off your connection to the larger universal mind entirely, and you'll gain no power, no wisdom, and no useful information at all until your calm returns. Turning to the matter of habit, Wattles reminds us that the whole world, in a very real sense, runs on habit. Kings, tyrants, and powerful figures hold their positions largely because people have simply grown habitually accustomed to accepting them. Things remain as they are mostly because people have formed the habit of accepting them as they currently stand. You yourself, Wattles suggests, may have formed the habit of thinking of yourself as a fairly ordinary person, someone of limited ability, or even something of a failure. Whatever you habitually think yourself to be, he tells us, that is exactly what you become. You must now deliberately form a greater, better habit. Picturing yourself as a being of essentially limitless power and habitually holding that thought of yourself not just for a few scattered minutes of daily affirmation, but consistently throughout every hour of your ordinary working day. It is a habitual thought, not the occasional one, that ultimately decides your destiny. Prayer and affirmation, in Wattles' framework, exist for exactly one purpose: to help you change your underlying habit of thought. Any act, whether mental or physical, repeated often enough, eventually becomes a genuine habit. So repeat deliberately and consistently the thought of your own real power and ability until it becomes simply the only way you know how to think about yourself. Having addressed hurry and habit, Wattles turns to what he considers the single most important activity available to any human being: genuine, deliberate thought. Greatness, he tells us, is attained only through the constant thinking of great thoughts. No one can become great in their outward personality until they first become great internally. And no one becomes great internally without actually thinking. No amount of reading, education, or study by itself can make you great without real thought behind it. But genuine thought can make you great with remarkably little formal study at all. Thinking, Wattles observes, happens to be the hardest and most exhausting of all mental labors, which is exactly why so many people shrink from it, filling their leisure hours instead with an endless chase of distraction and amusement, largely as a way of avoiding the effort of thinking at all. His advice, then, is refreshingly direct. Read less and think more. Read about genuinely great subjects and think seriously about great questions and larger issues. Thinking, not the mere accumulation of facts or information, is what actually builds a real personality. Because thinking itself is a form of growth, and you simply cannot think without growing in some way. Every single thought, Wattles observes, tends to engender another thought behind it. Write down one idea and others will naturally follow, until you've filled an entire page. There can be no genuine greatness, he insists, without original thought of your own. Everything a person does outwardly is really just expression and completion of their inward thinking. No meaningful action is possible without thought behind it, and no truly great action becomes possible until a great thought has come first. Your entire environment, in fact, is shaped by your habitual thought. Things tend to arrange themselves around you according to whatever central idea or conception you hold of yourself. Change that central idea, Wattles tells us, and you change the entire arrangement of facts and circumstances making up your life. You are what you are, and you are where you are, quite simply, because you think as you currently do. He urges us to go back and think deeply, not superficially, about everything covered so far. The right viewpoint, the reality that we live in a perfect, though incomplete, world, the great intelligence living within us as our own inner light, our full consecration to obedience, and our conscious identification with the Supreme. Think about all of it, Wattles insists, until you genuinely see it as true, and until you fully grasp what it actually means for how you're meant to live and act. Building directly on this foundation of deliberate thought, Wattles now turns to actually putting it into practice, starting with the very closest circle of all, our own homes. Do not merely think that you're going to become great someday. He tells us, think that you are great right now. Don't wait for some future moment, some better environment, some more suitable set of circumstances to begin acting in a great way. Begin exactly where you currently stand, with the people who already surround you. Lincoln, Wattles reminds us, was every bit as great as a struggling backwoods lawyer as he later was as president, as that backwoods lawyer. He simply did ordinary, common things in a great way, and that habit of greatness is precisely what eventually made him president. Had he waited until reaching Washington to begin practicing greatness, he would have remained entirely unknown. You are not made great, Wattles insists, by your particular location or by what you happen to receive from other people, and you'll never manage to express real greatness for as long as you remain dependent on others. Greatness only becomes visible once you begin standing genuinely on your own. And it doesn't matter, he adds, how the people around you, even members of your own household, happen to treat you. Their behavior toward you has nothing whatsoever to do with whether you yourself are being great. Your Father, as Jesus said, is kind even to the unthankful and the wicked. Treat the unthankful and the difficult people in your own life with that same great, unwavering kindness, exactly as God does. Begin then quite literally at home. It's a genuinely great person, Wattles tells us, who can remain poised, calm, and unfailingly kind within their own family circle. If your attitude at home consistently reflects the very best you're capable of thinking, you'll soon become the very one the rest of your family relies upon, a source of real strength during times of trouble. At the same time, Wattles cautions against throwing yourself away entirely in service to others. A genuinely great person respects themselves. They help and they serve, but they never become slavishly servile. You do real harm to someone, he points out, when you wait on them far too much, doing for them what rightfully belongs to their own responsibility. The ideal world isn't one where a great many people are simply waited on by others. It's one where everybody genuinely learns to wait on themselves. Nor should you become anxious over the mistakes or failures of the people around you, feeling you must constantly step in and correct them. Every person, Wattles reminds us, remains perfect on their own particular plane of development, and you cannot possibly improve on the work God is already doing in them. Nothing can truly be wrong except your own personal attitude. Get that right, and you can trust that everything else genuinely is right too. It takes a truly great soul, Wattles tells us, to live comfortably alongside people who do things differently than you would, without slipping into either criticism or unwanted interference. Once these same principles are established at home, Wattles tells us they extend outward quite naturally into every corner of your wider life, your neighborhood, your workplace, and the world beyond. The very same rules that govern your conduct at home, he insists, must govern your conduct absolutely everywhere. Never forget, even for a moment, that this remains a perfect world, and that you stand as a God among equally divine companions. You are just as great as the greatest among them, yet all remain your genuine equals. Rely completely on your own perception of truth, Wattles urges. Trust the inner light more than mere calculation or reasoning, but be certain that what you're perceiving genuinely comes from that inner light. Arrive at in calm, settled poise rather than fear or haste. Your conscious identification with the larger all-mind will supply you with all the knowledge you genuinely need to handle whatever situation might arise, whether in your own life or in the lives of those around you. Wattles points once again to Lincoln here, recalling how, after the devastating Union defeat at Fredericksburg, it was Lincoln alone who managed to supply the nation with a steady reserve of faith and hope. Leading men from across the entire country would walk into his room heavy with sorrow, and walk back out again cheerful and renewed, having stood, without quite realizing it, face to face with something genuinely divine in that tall, plain, patient man. Have complete faith, Wattles tells us, in your own ability to meet whatever combination of circumstances life happens to bring your way. If you need particular friends, they'll be brought to you at the right time. If you need particular information, it will reach you exactly when you need it. That same inner power urging you forward is equally active in the very people and resources you'll eventually need, drawing them steadily toward you. Don't rush to attempt great things, Wattles cautions, before you're genuinely ready to approach them in a great way. If you try to handle significant matters from a small, incomplete state of consecration and wavering faith, you'll fail. Doing great things won't by itself make you great, but genuinely becoming great will inevitably lead you toward doing great things in due course. So begin exactly where you already are, with whatever you're already doing each day, and don't rush toward recognition or applause. Great people, Wattles reminds us, never chase after being noticed. Greatness carries its own reward in the simple, quiet joy of knowing you're steadily advancing. He also repeats here, in this wider setting, a caution he first raised at home. Avoid meddling in other people's personal affairs. Help everyone who genuinely comes to you, but don't go about officiously trying to correct or manage other people's lives. If you live a genuinely great life without constant preaching, Wattles tells us, you'll accomplish vastly more good than someone who lives a small life while lecturing everyone around them constantly. Simply living according to this higher principle will become self-evident to everyone around you over time, without you ever needing to explain or announce it. Having laid out this whole practical path, Wattles pauses to circle back and clear up a few points that tend to trip readers up, starting once again with that crucial matter of viewpoint. We've been trained, he acknowledges, partly through certain mistaken religious teachings, to picture the world as something like a wrecked ship driven helplessly onto a rocky coast, with total destruction simply a matter of time, and the best we can hope for being the rescue of perhaps a few members of the crew. This view, Wattles insists, is entirely mistaken. The world is not wrecked at all. It's more like a magnificent steamer, its engines fully intact, its machinery in perfect working order, its bunkers full of coal, amply provisioned for the entire voyage. That ship currently sails the open sea, tacking this way and that, simply because no one has yet fully learned the right course to steer. We are, collectively, still learning to steer, and in due time, Wattles tells us, will come grandly into the harbor of complete harmony. Nothing, therefore, can be genuinely wrong with such a world or with any part of it, including your own personal affairs, since your affairs form part of that same larger whole steadily moving toward completion. Nothing can check this forward movement except you yourself, and you can only check it by adopting a mental attitude working against the mind of God. You have nothing to keep right, Wattles tells us, except yourself. Keep yourself right, and nothing can genuinely go wrong for you. He also reminds us here that our own thought forms end up shaped largely by our overall view of the cosmos. See the world as a lost, ruined thing, and you'll inevitably see yourself as sharing in its supposed sins and weaknesses. See it instead as good and steadily advancing, and you free yourself to see your own life the very same way. From this renewed foundation on viewpoint, Wattles returns once more to the subject of thought itself, adding further depth to what he covered earlier. You will never become great. He reminds us again, until your own thoughts genuinely make you great, and so it remains of the very first importance that you actually think. You'll never accomplish great things in the outward world until you first think great things internally, and you'll never think great thoughts until you think honestly about truth, about the genuine verities of existence. To think great thoughts, Wattles insists, you must be absolutely sincere, which means knowing clearly that your own intentions are sound. Insincere or dishonest thinking, however clever or logical it might appear, is never truly great. The first and most essential step, he tells us, is seeking out the truth about human relationships, understanding clearly what you owe to others and what they, in turn, owe to you. This brings us back once again to the importance of the right viewpoint. And Wattles specifically recommends studying the science of organic and social evolution to deepen this understanding. He also emphasizes here just how difficult it genuinely is to grasp, at any real depth, our complete unity with God. Anyone can accept the idea on a merely superficial level, but to actually feel and realize it takes sustained, serious thought. It's a tremendous realization. Wattles tells us that everything you need already exists within you, that you don't actually need to figure out how to acquire the power to become what you want to be. You simply need to learn how to properly use the power you already possess. To fully rid yourself of old, limiting ideas about other people, Wattles tells us you'll need to think seriously about the genuine value and worth of the human soul. You must stop dwelling on people's mistakes and start noticing their genuine successes. Stop seeing only faults and start seeing real virtues. You can no longer view men and women as lost or ruined beings sinking towards some lower fate. You have to come to see them instead as shining souls steadily ascending towards something higher. He offers, as a striking real-world example, the labor leader Eugene Debs, whom Wattles praises for the sheer depth of his genuine reverence for other human beings, knowing that no appeal for help was ever made to Debs in vain, and that his sincere warmth toward every person he met, rich or poor, had made him a beloved figure to an enormous number of people. This, Wattles tells us, is what real, sustained thought about the value of others can accomplish. Nothing but thought, he reminds us one final time here, can ever make you great. Wattles now turns his attention specifically to how Jesus himself defined true greatness, and the sharp contrast this creates with what most people typically imagine greatness to be. In the 23rd chapter of Matthew, Wattles notes, Jesus draws a very clear line between genuine and false greatness, warning his followers against adopting what he calls the principle of the Pharisees. Though genuinely just and upright in many of their dealings, the Pharisees loved the most honored seats at gatherings and loved being addressed with important titles. Against this, Jesus offered a very different measure entirely. Whoever wishes to become great among you, he said, let that person serve. Most people's idea of greatness, Wallace observes, actually runs in the opposite direction, toward getting oneself served rather than serving others, toward gaining a position of command over other people. This desire to dominate others, he argues, has driven a staggering share of human history, from ancient warfare and conquest right down to the modern business world. He even brings up a well-known remark from Robert Ingersoll, who couldn't understand why enormously wealthy men like Rockefeller or Carnegie kept relentlessly pursuing still more money long after they already had more than they could possibly use. But Wattles offers his own explanation for this. Such men, he argues, aren't really chasing dollars at all. They're chasing power, the very same underlying drive as the ancient Pharisees, merely wearing modern dress. Contrast this, Wattles urges, with Lincoln, widely regarded as America's greatest figure, precisely because people recognize in him, above every other public figure, a genuine and consistent spirit of service, not servility, Wattles is careful to clarify, but authentic service. This is exactly why he warns, as you personally begin advancing and gaining real influence, you'll face a very real temptation, the pull toward patronizing others, toward inserting yourself into their affairs, toward directing people who haven't actually asked for your direction. Guard carefully against this. But guard, too, against the opposite extreme, throwing yourself away entirely in constant self-sacrifice, since that particular pattern, however well-intentioned, isn't genuine greatness either. It's simply a different kind of imbalance. Naturally, Wattles anticipates an objection here. What if you're genuinely surrounded by real poverty, suffering, and visible injustice? Doesn't that demand your continuous, total giving? His answer sends us back once more to the foundational matter viewpoint, and from there, into a fuller account of human evolution itself. There was undoubtedly a time, Wallace reminds us, when this earth held no life whatsoever, when it existed only as a ball of burning gas and molten rock. Gradually, according to findings of geology, a crust formed, the surface cooled, water gathered, and eventually, somewhere in that primitive setting, life first appeared. Behind even the simplest single-celled organisms, Wattles argues, stood the same insistent spirit, the one life seeking ever fuller expression, gradually building more complex organisms as more and more life poured into them. Eventually came what Wattles calls the great day of the whole evolutionary process, the appearance of man himself, an ape-like being outwardly, yet carrying an entirely different capacity for growth and thought hidden inside. Art, architecture, poetry, and song all existed as unrealized possibilities within that earliest human soul. And from that day forward, Wallace tells us, God has been steadily working within human beings, pouring more and more of himself into each successive generation, driving humanity toward better conditions. Socially, politically, and domestically, however brutal and painful processes often looked along the way. Every generation of people, he observes, genuinely wants more than the generation before it. Not because of simple greed, but because God has lifted the whole human race to the point where ordinary people can now picture a better life than the one currently available to them. And that very capacity to imagine something better, Wattles insists, is itself the Spirit of God pushing humanity onward. This naturally raises a question of what we actually owe to God directly, and Wattles turns to answer plainly. An enormous amount of human energy, he observes, gets spent in the name of serving God, through religious ceremony, church work, and formal worship. Wattles argues that this conventional picture of religious service is largely mistaken. God, as Scripture itself makes clear, has no genuine need of ceremonies or offerings. He needs nothing at all from human hands or voices. Instead, the entire arc of evolution Wattles just described shows God seeking expression through humanity itself. The only real service you can offer God, then, is to give full expression to whatever he's trying to bring into the world specifically through you. Your first duty to God, to yourself, and to the wider world is simply to make yourself as great a personality in every possible way as you genuinely can. Wattles closes this line of thought with a bit of practical reassurance. For anyone feeling held back by responsibilities at home, worried that pursuing their own growth might harm those who depend on them, his counsel is to move forward anyway, without undue fear, trusting that any temporary loss at home will prove only apparent, since a person who genuinely grows into greater capability soon becomes far better equipped to care for the very people depending on them than they ever were before. To help make all of this genuinely practical rather than merely theoretical, Wattles offers his readers a specific mental exercise, one meant to be practiced regularly until its core ideas simply become habitual, ever-present thought rather than a set of words recited once or twice a day and then forgotten. He's careful to clarify that there's no special virtue in the words themselves, no shortcut hidden inside some charm or incantation. The whole purpose of the exercise is simply to think certain thoughts repeatedly until thinking them becomes an settled habit, present in your mind throughout the entire day, not merely during the few minutes set aside for formal practice. Find a stretch of 20 minutes or so where you won't be interrupted. Get physically comfortable, lying flat if possible, and let your attention travel slowly down through your body, releasing every muscle as you go. From there, move through calm, deliberate thoughts affirming that your nerves, lungs, heart, and digestive system are all functioning in perfect order, that you carry no anxiety about money, health, or any other matter, that you rise above every temptation towards selfishness or ill will, and that you hold only right intentions. From there, the exercise walks you deliberately back through each of the core ideas we've already covered together, your viewpoint that all is well in an advancing world, your consecration and obedience to your own soul, your identification with the one source of all things, your idealization of yourself at your very highest, and finally your realization, appropriating for yourself the power to become and to do exactly what you've pictured, trusting fully and fearlessly because God remains with you. And so we arrive at last at Wattles' own closing summary of everything this book has offered us. All people, he tells us one final time, are made from a very same intelligent substance, and therefore all carry within them the very same essential powers and possibilities. Greatness lives equally in everyone and can be expressed by anyone. Every person may become great, because every quality present in God is equally present in man. Heredity and circumstance alike can be overcome to the deliberate exercise of the soul's own inherent creative power. To avoid the errors that come from limited human knowledge, we must connect our own soul to the larger universal spirit, casting out from ourselves anything that stands as a barrier between us and God. We must reach the right viewpoint, recognizing that nothing is genuinely wrong, that all things are advancing steadily toward completion. We must consecrate ourselves fully to obedience toward our own highest inner voice. We must recognize and affirm our own real unity with the Father, trusting completely in our own perception of truth, beginning always with the smallest, most immediate matters right in front of us. We must think, sincerely and deliberately, forming a clear mental picture of ourselves at our very highest, holding that picture steadily until it becomes our settled, habitual way of seeing ourselves, and then expressing that picture outwardly in every single action, however small, until the world itself takes notice. Wattles closes his own book with an extended passage from Emerson's great essay on the Oversoul, a fitting choice, since it captures, in Emerson's own soaring language, the same central idea Wattles has spent the whole book building toward, that within each of us lives something greater than our individual, everyday self, a deep, shared soul connecting every person to one another and to the eternal whole, and that it's only by yielding to this larger inner light, rather than clinging to our smaller, separate selves, that we come to know real wisdom, real virtue, and real power. So here we are at the close of Wallace Science of Being Great, the final volume in a trilogy that took us from getting rich to getting well and finally to becoming genuinely great. What ties all three together is really one single conviction, carried consistently across every page Wattles ever wrote, that the power you're looking for was never actually out there somewhere, waiting to be found. It was always here inside you, in your own capacity to think clearly, to believe sincerely, and to act day after day in a great way, no matter how small the task in front of you happens to be. Form your ideal. Hold it steadily. Serve rather than seek to be served. Trust your own inner perception of truth. And let every ordinary act of your ordinary day become, quietly, an expression of the great soul you already are. If this final chapter of Wattles' work has meant something to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now, so you'll be here for whatever we explore together next. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Until next time, think greatly, act greatly, and go be great.